Thank you for being here. Today, our seminar is about how teachers can use, reuse, and create their own open educational resources to share with colleagues. And with this seminar, we aim to helping you to find and recognize resources that are open for reuse and to use them in creating your own open educational resources that can be shared with your colleague. With no further ado, I would like to introduce you to our expert, Dr. Elena Shulman. And she is an expert in digital resource management, e-learning content, quality and open educational resources, discovery and exchange. And she has contributed to the design and administration of e-learning portals in Europe and the United States. She has been a university lecturer and is also an author of journal articles and award-winning scholarly works. Dr. Shulman has managed and contributed to a number of European Commission funded projects on open educational resources and the technology and enhanced learning domains such as Lang OER, which provides the basis for today's demonstration and discussion. So, welcome, Elena. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And please, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. Everyone, thank you for joining. I'll get started. So just a few words. The presentation that I'm going to give is part of an outcome of a project called Lang OER. The purpose of the project is to encourage and stimulate teachers from all over Europe to create their own open educational resources in what especially are known as lesser used languages. Lesser used languages in the OER sense, it really means languages other than English. Of course, you know English dominates a lot of the open educational movement, if you've encountered that. So the idea is to get everyone, more people in all kinds of languages to create open educational resources and to use them. So that's the goal of the project and the source of some of the discussion we're going to have today. So let me begin with a little introduction of where we're going and what we should encounter. I'm going to discuss briefly the definition of what is OER. You hear that a lot. What is that? We're going to talk about Creative Commons licenses and other ways of making things open. We're going to talk about what openness is, why you should strive for openness, what we mean by that. I'm going to show you, I'm going to try and really bring practical aspects to this discussion so it's not theoretical, what is and what isn't, but how to find open educational resources and to identify them, to say, oh, this is really open. So this is a hands-on activity. I'm going to explain how best to reuse open educational resources. You know, what are the best practices? What you should keep in mind as you're looking for resources and as you're remixing them and sharing them. By the end of this session, I hope that you'll have a clearer understanding of open educational resources. So the idea is that you're going to have a better understanding of OERs. You're going to become familiar with Creative Commons tools. You're going to understand why Creative Commons tools for licensing are a good option. And then you'll be able to use them yourself. And finally, I wanted to get you started on creating your own reusable open educational resources. So you're going to see some examples of, you know, and start thinking about what is really open, what is an open resources, how to create something reusable, and not just from the perspective of the license, but what are the components of a reusable objects in an online environment. Right, so this is all about the digital world. So let's just start with the definition. There's a number of definitions for what is OER, open educational resources. UNESCO has been at the forefront of promoting open educational resources, not just in Europe, obviously, but all over the world, and really sees the benefits of that in education. Looking at we can look at their definition. This is from 2012 Paris OER Declaration. So what is that? It's any teaching, learning, and research materials in any mediums. So it's a very broad definition. They don't really specify it has to be Creative Commons. It just means it has to be in the public domain or released under an open license that permits reuse, without cost, to be adapted, to be redistributed by the user to someone else. So it can be quite, it's a quite broad umbrella of what is an open educational resources. You might encounter other definitions, and that's okay. This is the one that really captures I think the spirit more than anything. What is an OER? Openness and OER in education has specific meaning. So an OER can be many different things. It can be an image, maybe online animated objects like science demonstrations. Maybe some of your STEM educators have used those before. Educational games, really educational games, not just games, but there's collections of open educational games out there. Lesson plans, it can be something as simple as a lesson plan that teachers shared with each other. Lectures, it can be audio, video, interactive tests, and anything that really, from my perspective as someone who's dealt with a lot of open educational resources, is something that really engages and gets the learner to interact with the content rather than just read a text, right? So the idea is that it's open, it's shareable, and that it actually makes best use of the online format. So this idea of openness, and you might have heard of that before. So the idea is that actually the more you open up what you've done and let others reuse it, the more creativity it inspires. The more innovation comes out of this openness, that in itself it sparks further innovation. One of the pioneers of the open education movement is David Wiley, and he has these the 5 R's that go along with reusing. What is open education and openness in general? Revising, remixing, redistributing, retaining. And so this is the background, the conceptually what people are striving for when they talk about open educational resources. And there's a lot of discussions about why should we do that? Why should we open up everything we're doing, especially in education? So the idea is that it's OERs, obviously they're free, so it improves affordability for teachers and learners in all over the world. It's been shown to improve student success, mostly because it actually helps with the innovation in pedagogy, because it gets teachers like you thinking about what is the most effective way that I can really engage the student with new tools, environments that they are familiar with, that they like to be in. So it's stimulating some innovation that wouldn't be available to teachers otherwise. And it uses the public investment in the best possible way. In other words, a lot of these open educational resources in Europe are actually created by European ministries of education. They have large repositories in many instances where they have created professionally, created a lot of very good resources, and they've made them open. And so this is getting them out there, getting them reused is really the best way to make to use public resources. No, just to kind of stimulate our debate. Do you have any ideas? What are the cons of openness? What are the arguments? What have you heard in terms of why you should or should not strive to make things that you create open to others and open to others your use? If you want to put that in the chat, we can take a look at that together. If you've come across this debate before, Francisco, you think that that's a con, that might be a negative if someone has can benefit economic from what you've done. So those are typical people's concerns. Well, I've just created this, someone's reusing and making money off of it. Why is that fair? So this is something that some people are not comfortable with releasing their work. But then again, if you think about if you've created something, all of the elements that have gone into the creation of that, you've in essence borrowed from others. So sharing it back out is builds on a cycle of knowledge creation. And if you see a lot of the big technology companies actually, they make a lot of their software what's called open source. That's also part of this open movement. And then all of these developers come and build new products on top of it without having to pay anything to the companies, and then that stimulates further economic development. So there's this large ripple of benefits, even though you may have to sort of let go of your original product, but the benefits stream back actually towards those companies, so that then they start to resell more and more services. So there's a logic to it that isn't always obvious, but it has played out very clearly in the last 10 years with the idea of openness. So one thing I want to point out, and this is very important for especially for educators, many people are not aware that just because something is on the online, that it may be restricted. So I think a lot of teachers, maybe you do sometimes as well, you find a nice image online, it doesn't say anything, there's no the author or the creator doesn't say anything about what you can and can't do with it, and you say, well, if it's online, it's free, I can reuse it. This is actually the law is actually the opposite. By default, anything that is online is under copyright unless the creator has explicitly said that this is open. So again, everything is under copyright. If you see it and it doesn't say anything, that means it's closed. That means it's copyrighted. A lot of people don't know that. And sometimes authors and creators, maybe like you, maybe you've put up something interesting that you thought, well, I put it online, it's great, I want people to use this, it's online, it's free, great, you walk away. Actually, they can't, unless you make this very clear in your presentation. So not only you're not really supposed to take anything that doesn't have clear instructions, but you're also, when you put it back up, others are not really allowed to reuse what you've done, and you might not even know that. So one way around this issue, this is a rigid law, and this is worldwide. One way that there's a number of people who've been working on this for a long time on how to solve this problem, how to really release the web, because people want to put things online to share them, but copyright legislation is so complicated. And so what's the solution? How do you actually make this understandable and findable, when people want things to be found that are free, and people who are looking for those really cleared things? So one of the approaches is what's called Creative Commons. It's a nonprofit organization that have come up with a number of tools for people to be able to reuse, so they can post the correct information so that others can use that and say, oh yes, this is allowed, this is not allowed, I can reuse this, or I can't. So this is one of these approaches that solves the problem. It's not the only one. You can also just say anyone is free to use this in any way you want. Just mention me. That's also okay. But actually, Creative Commons allows for machines to also find things that are marked correctly as open. And I'll give you some examples of this. So just a little bit. And again, this is recorded, so you can go back and look at anything I'm posting here, and some of the links you'll see. You can follow that later. So Creative Commons is an organization, and they provide these easy-to-use legal tools so to really release that user-generated content in a simple way, and they standardize this in there so the machines can also find it and read it when you do a search. So you'll see, I'll give you some examples of what I mean. So this really opens up a very large universe of open resources that you can use and feel comfortable that you're not violating any copyright laws, and that you can also then share back out in the most best practice ways possible. Now, the thing is, with the Creative Commons, it doesn't wipe out your rights. In other words, um, you still retain copyright. If you created something, you have your rights. You can decide how people want to use it. Creative Commons will let you be very specific about how someone can use what you created, and you still are the original owner of that thing. So it doesn't wipe you out. You don't lose anything. You're just being very clear on what is allowed. Um, so you can also you can say yes, you can modify this picture. There's different ways of stating what is and is not allowed, and I'll give you some example of that. Um, this also will let you uh, because people have been doing this now for a while, there's a giant pool of Creative Commons licensed material that's available to you. So if you use the Creative Commons search, and Root had put that in the chat, uh, the Creative Commons itself lets you search for resources or images that, especially images that are or marked as Creative Commons. So and you'll see there's really literally millions of things. There it is, http search.creativecommons.org. So check that out. That's a really straightforward resource for finding images, especially. So again, and I'll return to that. So many of these search engines like Creative Commons search, Google actually lets you search for based on Creative Commons, but a lot of them are just images. So that's a simple thing to search and describe. Educational repositories actually let you search for specific types of educational resources under specific subjects. So they're more complex, and also by the different kind of licenses they might have. So they're more sophisticated and more geared towards educators, where you find more than just images, but actually videos or simulations, demonstrations, interactive tests. So just let's go back a little bit to the Creative Commons licenses, so that you have a very clear grounding on what that involves. So there are 5 components to a Creative Commons license. All Creative Commons licenses require the user of a resource to attribute, what they call attribution. So you always have to say, if you reuse something, who it's from. In other words, you always have to give credit. Now you can also state that you do not want somebody else to use this for economic gains. You can also say that you want them to share this in exactly the same license format as you've shared it. Or you can say you can share this, but you can't change it. Okay, so you can add all of these. This is a kind of a mix and match, and you'll see you can kind of stack it. You can say have more or less. So if you see on this slide, you can select a license that you're going to apply to your resource that just is very open. Okay, you just have to attribute it to me. You don't need to do much. Or attribute it and share alike, meaning you have to retain the same license. Or you can say, I want you to share. I don't want you to make money off of this. And of course, I want you to attribute. All Creative Commons licenses require attribution. Yeah, so Nora says the problem is when students use these resources, they just copy and do not elaborate. Yeah, so that's really where you as the teacher have to step in basically and give them kind of a mini version of this lecture. In essence, encourage them to say, okay, if you created something, you can be very clear about what others are allowed to do with it. You'll get credit for it, and you can see how it evolves and becomes interesting, and you're always going to be connected to that. So you can encourage them to really start understanding that you can't just grab things offline, that if you want to remix them, that's fantastic, but you have to pick the right thing. There's so much choice. They don't have to take the wrong one. They can find a really good resource that allows for reuse. There's a lot of choices out there. So as you see, you can mix and match the different components of the license that really fits your needs. And then also, on the other side, you have to respect that. So I'm showing you all of the specific meanings of each kind of license, because not only do you do that for You need to know this so you can choose your own license, but that's so that you can respect the license of others. You've probably you've probably seen some of these CC BY, or some of these symbols probably look familiar, but you may or not have been fully aware of what does it mean, and it's hard to sort of decipher a lot of small print. So I've provided this a more fully elaborated definition for each type of license. So the most free kind is this one. It's just attribution 4.0, and you see 4.0 because there've been different versions of these licenses. This large group of people working on this problem of how to make things truly open, are facing the issue of, how do you do it across all of these legal regimes all around the world? Remember, this is a global movement. So when you're using these and when you're searching for this, you're part of a global movement of opening up education and reusing good quality materials and sharing it back out, and that it might be used, anywhere in the world. So one of the things they've come up with is they've managed to tweak the license information to such an extent that it covers the legal regimes very broadly. Previous licenses, they would have them for particular countries, and etc. But the most recent one, the 4.0, is the most international. So as you're looking around, you might see some of the older versions. Some of them are country specific, so pay attention to that. Not all countries abide by those stipulations in the older versions. So, and again, I'm not going to go into great detail on each one of these, but as you can see, so there's these icons. Sometimes all you see is the icon. Sometimes you'll see actually the text. Usually the icon is clickable. When you click on the icon, it'll take you to a web page that is connected to that license. So it will actually, if you want to know more, you click on that. You would click here on the a button. And also you can reuse those buttons. So when you create your own resource, you can go to Creative Commons and the downloads route just put there. You can download those buttons and use them so people know to click on them and learn more if they need it. This is under Creative Commons license. Yes, under 4.0 attribution. Yep. So now let me tell you a little bit more about another kind of license, or it's not really a license, but something called public domain. So the Creative Commons licenses let you retain copyright, but there's a whole other category of resources. So the PPT you are using is license free. It just requires attribution. In other words, when I say it's licensed by meaning attribution, means you would just, if you reused it, you would say from from this author, from this presenter, and you can do whatever you want with it. That would be the approach. And why don't we'll get to that, exactly how you would choose a license and what that means, and how you apply it in a minute. But I just want to say a few more words about public domain. Public domain is when resources that are completely free, they're free of copyright. There's such a thing. So sometimes an author says, I am completely releasing this from copyright. And they can use the tools provided by Creative Commons. They have a public domain tool that you can just release it to the world. They don't have to attribute, they don't have to do anything. They can do anything they want with it. Then there's also something called public domain mark, which is basically, so this is the dedication. So you're the copyright holder. You say, I'm releasing this. No one needs to attribute anything to me, and that's called CC0. So that might be something you might consider. And also when you see it, you'll know what's happening. Or what's called public domain mark. There's a lot of things out there that are no longer in the public, no longer copyrighted. Basically the creator or author died some period ago, and they've now become part of the public domain. Now, it's important you have to know that, well, this is truly the case, but it's very good to mark that as public domain, because then it becomes findable for the rest of the users who might want to do it. So this is kind of a crowd sourcing activity where you're really helping to release public domain, to mark them properly, so that everyone else can reuse it. So Creative Commons encourages this by providing a tool to do that. So now I would like you to actually go to Creative Commons and choose, go through there. It's very simple. So you can go through and choose a license that you think would be the kind of license you want. This is the Creative Commons license chooser. So you see, they just ask you simple things. Okay, can somebody just do something to it? Can they change it? Can they modify the image? Yes, no. If yes, and you see how Ruth chose, first she chose yes, as long as others share alike. So in other words, yes, you can do whatever you want, but then you have to share it just the way I'm sharing it. Okay, so that tells that's one choice. Allow commercial reuse or not. So maybe you are, well, why should I do that? It's very, people are really encouraged, especially in education, to allow for reuse. Even in commercial sense, because if you work in the finance, if you work in a private school, sometimes the argument is actually that you have some limitations on using Creative Commons materials that are marked no commercial content. So you have to be careful that, and you're kind of shutting out other teachers from being able to do that. So then you see now that your choice has been now reflected in the little icon you see there have a web page. You see there, that's your choice. So now if you click the URL, it will take you to the license itself, so you can read more about what you've chosen. There it is. So all of your everyone who sees that will also see the more details on the license. And you can, if you come across something and you a Creative Commons license, you can click on that and figure out, oh yeah, I have to share the same way, but I can't use it for commercial, etc., etc. So it provides further information. And Ruth, can we go back a little bit to one back, do a back? And you see the text there. That's the snippet of code that you would put on your web page. Let's say you have a blog, or you know a little bit about just entering some text into a web page. You can use that, and it'll generate that button for you. And also it will let search engines find your Creative Commons item. So a search engine will look for this text so that it becomes part of a larger global database of resources. And so you're really opening it up. So so save that page. That's an interesting page to have on hand. So let's go back to the slides. So after the seminar, my PowerPoint, the recording is available. Ruth, how does it work in terms of the PowerPoint?
The PowerPoint will be shared, if you agree, along with the recording of this seminar.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree, and because the whole point is to share that. So I've put all of these links in here so that you can all reuse them. So definitely take it, use it, reuse it. Now remember, I've reused parts from other authors and creators, and so you have to be careful to reuse it and make sure you pay attention to their rules. So in other words, if they said don't do this, don't reuse my thing for some commercial purpose, you can't then change their will. You would have to take that out if you're gonna reuse it. I would release this in whatever way you want to use it, but maybe some of the items I have in here have a different stipulation. You're gonna have to be careful, and this goes for anything. You're going to have to pay attention, and if you're gonna mix a bunch of different things with a bunch of different licenses, you're gonna have to take that into account. So it can get complicated sometimes, but I think it should be okay. So let's move on to the next. Again, remember I mentioned public domain. You can also choose a public domain license based on the specifics. Either it's something you are releasing to the world, or you want to mark something you know is public domain so that the rest of the world can find it. So Creative Commons provides that option. We're not going to go there at the moment, but I provided the link for you so you can follow up. So let's review a little bit about what we just covered. So as you see here, if something is marked public domain, that's the symbol there. You can pretty much do anything you want with something that's marked public domain. You can copy, you can publish it. You do not have to attribute it. You can reuse it commercially. You can modify it. You can do anything you want, and you can change the license. You don't, if it's public domain and you use it and you say, oh, but I want to retain all rights to it. I just want people to only share. I don't want them to touch it. I'm going to make money off of it. Da, da, da. Fine. You can change the license on public domain. YouTube will have its own license. So you have to look on every service that you're using. Usually someone will, some of these services allow people to choose Creative Commons as when they're creating a resource, or there'll be a statement, usually at the bottom, a rights statement or terms. You have to click on it and read it. Basically, you have to take the time to understand what you're really allowed to do with the resources you want to use. A lot of YouTube material is actually, you can reuse it if you just embed it, so it's clear that it's coming from YouTube. But some people will release things on YouTube with explicit Creative Commons licenses or public domain licenses. So the other types of licenses you can see, there's a lot of variation. You can really limit reuse, or you can really open it up from top to bottom. The recommended way, unless you really want to release everything to the world, is the CC BY, meaning just the attribution. You just have to say who this comes from. So it's and we've already covered that. You saw that. You see, so the CC BY, this is the really open one, where all you can do, you can share, you can remix, and see that, and this page really sums it up. And I can't then change my mind. So let's say I've put a license on this PowerPoint and distributed it. I can't go back and say, oh, you know what? I can't do that anymore. I want to limit what can be done with my slides. Too late. So once you release it, it's a certain object, a certain work with a particular license, it's going to stay that way. You can't change your mind. That doesn't mean you can't release a different version in some other format of this particular work, and you can put a different license on it. But those slides, this particular presentation is released under that license and stays that way. So now we get to the point of all of that, putting license information, using Creative Commons licenses. It's not just being clear and transparent. You could just say on the webpage, you can use this or in this way or that way, but it actually, again, as I mentioned, it lets search engines find that when someone looks for it. So maybe, so you can look for them in different ways. Creative Commons search, use Google, or if you're for educators, there's large repositories that have very specific search engines that are tailored to the kind of things you search for. So we can go back to this repository. I'll give you an example of it later. But for now, I want to show you how Google image search works. Maybe you can go to that, click on images. So this is a search within images. Okay. Now, once you have your term in the field and you select images, go to more. You see more on the same level as images. Let's say horse, the word horse.
Search tools?
There we go. Yes. And then more tools. Okay. Oh, usage rights right there. Yeah, it's so tiny. Yeah, usage rights. Okay. You see that? So here, Google, the search engine, has cataloged every picture of horse that somebody went and added that Creative Commons code to. So it knows that these things are under Creative Creative Commons and what kind of license it is, right? So you can filter it by, it can be just open for reuse or with some limitations. You see that? So that's why you would want to take the step to add that code, that small piece of code. Then it really pushes your creation out into this the search engine world where others can actually find it. And then now you know how to look for it, right? So if you want to just look from Google and you just need some images and you don't want to say, filter a bunch of times in one particular site, you can let Google do that for you. So I think that should be helpful, and you can see how it actually works to use a Creative Commons license. So now you know everything you're looking at. You don't have to worry about the license. Is it okay? You have already chosen that subsection of resources to be appropriate for your needs. One thing I want to reinforce, you see there's a lot of information. There's a lot of great collections of resources out there, and it's easy to actually become sort of lost in the maze or fall into the kind of the deep search world, and you find amazing things, and it's you see the possibilities, but then you really forget where you saw that. It starts kind of escaping from you. So it's very important to when you're working with open educational resources, collecting what you need to create your own, have a place where you actually keep them. Create like a Pinterest site that has all the repositories you like. Can we go to that Pinterest, the picture repositories? And then, of course, the other thing once you create that, you can then share that, obviously, and that's what Pinterest is, also with your colleagues. So all of this work that you've done, that you collected a lot of great things. So these are all image repositories that are either public domain or Creative Commons. So somebody has put them all on this site, and anyone can go to it and follow the links. So create your own. So where you collect the best ones, share that with colleagues, and then you're going to save a lot of time tracking back, figuring out what is it that you came across a month ago that was so great, but now good luck finding it, right? So be very meticulous in how you collect the resources, because you also want to be able to track back, where did I get that, right? Who is this by? Because if you want to reuse something, you're going to have to make sure you give them proper attribution. You're going to want to be able to link to the original. So it's very important to be very careful in your collecting of great stuff. The other thing is, what really open education is really about sharing with colleagues, getting recommendations. There's so much information out there. Identify a source for open educational resources, online resources that you trust, and a source that's updated often, and check that regularly. Really just keep abreast, because there's so much coming out there. It's a huge world of things you can use and that's available. So this is critical for making sure that everything is organized once you start doing things with it. So I was just curious, what are your sources? Some people already started to post. Carla says Pixabay. Do you have other great sources of not just images, but other kinds of resources that you like to use? Who do you go to when you want to find out what's happening, what's new? Unsplash. I don't know that one. That sounds okay. Flickr, yeah, that's a very good, reliable source. And in Flickr, you can search by Creative Commons licenses. Photosforclass.com. Okay. Yeah, please post as I'm speaking some other ideas, because here again we're practicing openness. In other words, you're sharing with your colleague what is it that you do, and of course you do this all the time, right? So, but now it has a kind of a logo or a name around it, but really it's this practice of sharing with colleagues on the great resources and collections. Something I want you to keep in mind is, openness is not just about a type of license. So it's not only that it has a Creative Commons license or open, but it has to be something, at least from my experience, something that others can actually really reuse when you get into more complex things than just images. If you're creating an open educational resource, it should have certain qualities. In other words, so that, a teacher, somebody creates something in Italy and you find this great resource in Spain, it's possible to reuse it if it has certain qualities that make it truly like travel across those boundaries, beyond just whether their license are open. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what I mean uh, uh, by these openness. So of course, the first thing is it has to have a license status. In other words, it has to say something. I'm going to take a sip, but it doesn't have to be Creative Commons. It can be something else. So a lot of very good sites, as we mentioned earlier, you have to go and look on just on their terms page. Usually it's at the bottom of their homepage. They'll say rights, terms. You click on that and you read it. And some of them will be very specific. They'll say for teachers can go do this and this and that and that. Okay, so they know that teachers are coming to their site and they have special rights for teachers. Some are more broad than that, but you always have to start with the license information. That has to be, you have to have it. There has to be something said so that you can know what you are allowed to do with it. It should be something that's really usable across different platforms, different systems, right? So that it's not just a very specific, software that only you and 10 other people can use, and that you have to download a lot of things, etc. So think about that. So it has to be something that can be easily accessed from any typical computer for any typical school. Something that doesn't need teachers to read a lot of instructions. In other words, it has to be something, if it's for a math teacher, for the 10-year-olds, even if it's written in a completely different language, they know exactly what they can do with this particular example or simulation, right? It has to be. It doesn't. You shouldn't be burdening the user of your open educational resources with trying to decipher what is this really for. If you want to go to the climate NASA, I'll give you an example of that. So NASA created this. I mean, and this is not necessarily, this kind of obviously a lot of work and professional time, and developers did this. But as you'll see, it's in English, but pretty much you can figure out what to do with it if you're teaching geography or environmental science. It has simulations. Select a topic. Just you can pick carbon dioxide. You can click on that, and it shows you the carbon dioxide levels over a period of time, right? So if you're a teacher of this subject, you can easily understand how you would use that. You see that? So, and NASA publishes everything when they create these resources. They're all in public domain. So feel free to go to NASA. Actually, they create fantastic resources on environmental and astronomy education for probably the science teachers already know that. But you see, so there's a scary image of carbon dioxide over the last 12 years. So something you can easily reuse for your lessons, and so can everybody else. Okay, so let's go back to the discussion. And also, it just has to be plain easy to use, right? So you don't have to give a lot of instructions, and it should just work. Pull a slider, press a button, something that actually works and is intuitive. So we don't really need a lot of instructions on how to use it, not just methodologically. And maybe some of you, your math teachers, you're familiar with GeoGebra. And there's a huge amount of GeoGebra material out there. It's user-generated simulations, mostly in algebra and geography, but there's some science stuff too. So if you're not familiar with it, check out GeoGebra. We won't go to it now. And all of that is released under Creative Commons licenses. There's almost close to 200,000 applets there, and you can go to it and create your own. So that we'll get to that. I'm going to show you a place where you can actually start creating your own open educational resources that are interactive, and so that you can then reuse for yourself. And again, so you see the interactivity is really important. So sometimes you can get a interactivity where the student has to do something and they get a response, yes, no, right, wrong, or the correct answer is, or at least some kind of feedback, so it's not just a passive experience. Those are really the best kind of open educational resources, where you really, the student can observe and can react. So just to sum up this this portion here is reuse things that are allowed. Look at the license for Creative Commons. The most basic one is just you have to say who it's from, attribute it, and keep track of things like the title, where you got it, the author, and what kind of license they have. There's a very helpful little plugin called openattribute.com that's intended to help you keep track of all of these things. Root, if you can go to that, quickly show everyone. You have to install it, so I'm not going to ask all of you to do it. You have to install it as an plugin into your Chrome or Firefox. But when you come to an image there, that so you install it and it just sits in your plugin sections. But when you, let's say, get to Flickr and you are on a image that has Creative Commons license information, it's kind of hidden in the metadata, this will grab that information for you. You can copy it and then you can repaste it anywhere you want. So it'll save you the trouble of having to rewrite it again. It'll actually just grab that information, read that information, and let you put it anywhere you want. So this is just a helpful little tool to save you work when you're working with images, especially. Something to keep in mind. So okay, now let's actually make an OER. Okay, so I'm going to show you a. This is not the only one. I mentioned GeoGebra, but I really like. I came across this recently. Something called learningapps.org. Okay, and the way they describe themselves is. It's just they provide an application. They really don't moderate anything you do. They let users just do whatever they want with it to support learning and teaching with small interactive modules. Basically, they expect you to reuse these modules in other bigger lesson plans and other activities. So it's just to collect these kind of small activities so that you can build on that and you can reuse what others have done. So they call these blocks apps. And they don't, you really decide what you want to do with it, and you can really choose the language. The information you will enter will be in your own language. So they don't limit you in that way. So let's go to that. Let's open learningapps.org, and let's say that you're, looking at it for this first time. When I first go to a site like this, the first thing I do is I look at the terms page. So this is kind of best practices. I say, oh, okay, I found this fantastic site. What can I really do? There we go. So right there at the bottom, you see that? Before I even, I see it looks great, interesting. What are the terms? I click on at the bottom. You see privacy terms. So below the images, yeah. So I check out what is this about? What kind of rights do they offer? Who gets to use it? So basically, their position is that you're free to reuse these in any way. Do not abridge the rights of others or violate copyright. But this is open to anyone to use and reuse in any way they want to. Okay, so you see here, it's not Creative Commons. They don't need to always use Creative Commons to do that. They just need to say it. Just they need to be clear, and they need to release it in a way that everybody can understand. Something um, really clear. It shouldn't be legalese. It shouldn't be something you have to interpret in for an hour. It just tells you that it's okay to do this and reuse it in any way you want. As you see up there, you can the program itself is available in multiple languages. But I'll tell you. But when you actually create the apps, the information you enter can be in any language. So let's browse apps, and you'll get a sense of. And it's a huge collection of little interactive modules in all kinds of subjects. Okay, so I mean, close to more than 200,000 or 300,000 items that people are creating and uploading all the time. So if you come across one that you're particularly interested in, you can reuse it, or you can use it as an example to create your own. So let's click on one of them, and you see what you see. There's a Greek one. I know I'm looking at very close. There, when you start writing them, you write in any language you want. It gives you a platform for what kind of activity you want to make. So maybe you can go to create app, so you can see the different options. So you have an idea, you pick a template, you fill it with content in any language you want, save it, share it. Okay, so let's just click on the any of the ones you see. Okay, so it gives you the messages. The teacher themselves created this message. These are just examples. These are examples people created it themselves, or you can just start a fresh one. So you can say create new app, and then just start filling all of this, the title in the language you want, and the activity. You can add images. Again, when you do that, you will respect copyright by adding that information or using only public domain. You can add audio, video. You can have students react to a video, answer questions, yes, no, false, true responses. And so you're giving it that bit of interactivity that really makes it more meaningful in an interactive context. It's very useful, and you have complete control over this app that you've just created. You can then grab it and reuse it on in a totally different site, and really build a very interesting interactive experience for your students without having to program a new app, or without being some kind of computer scientist. This is something that really I think you're going to benefit from, and you see it's open. So I want to show you. I know this is super interesting, and I want to show you how somebody reused them. Maybe can you go to the German Geschichte DE? It's on the slide that I'm on right now. So if you scroll down a little bit, so this is a series of modules on the history of World War II, but actually it's made up of little applets from this. You see that? Does that look familiar? They've actually just embedded their apps that they created into this larger lesson plan. And then they've added a license. You see the Creative Commons license, because the learning apps people say you can do anything you want, but not so they can apply any license they want. And they've built this series of activities using the learning apps tool. So there's a lot of you can do it in a lot of different ways. It saves you a lot of time, makes it interactive and very attractive. So they spend some time obviously uploading the maps, thinking about the kind of questions they would want, how it interacts exactly with the lesson plan for the day or for that month. So this is not going to solve all your problems, and it's a huge, simple, quick thing. It's not about that. But a lot of the, imagine you can reuse this in many ways. You can share this with colleagues, and they would benefit from your experience, and maybe they create something else, something also innovative and interesting. So this is what I really wanted to show you. What can be done. Now I've showed you this website. Yeah, so Ignacio, you say they have, it's nice, but they have modules on the same topic. Well, of course, Yeah, so you don't have to do it that way. So you can have it much more simple, depending also on the grade level. So it really opens up the possibilities for you. You can have a simple little interactive um, applet that tests a particular bit of knowledge that you want your students to master, or you can do a much more elaborate thing with that. It's really open to you to think. You see, it's kind of supposed to spark that innovation that I was talking about. And so, just to kind of sum up, share and redistribute, republish. So create this thing. You put a lot of effort into it. You know. Think about how you're teaching, what you're teaching, and how to best reach your students, and then choose the right channel for that. Make sure your license is open the way you want it to be. Add information to the license that others can use, and attribute others' work. Don't just reuse the work of others, just as you would like to have your work attributed. As you see here, I've put all the list of the links that I mentioned. Some of them we didn't even go to, but I have some examples here of learning resources. The link for the LRE for schools. So that's a repository of learning resources in many different languages. You can search it more specifically by subjects, age ranges, and most of the things, well, everything in there is open. Some of them are Creative Commons. Some of them are just like a license. Somebody said on their terms page, you can use this, etc., etc. So you can access these at your own leisure. I know you have a lot of leisure being teachers. So thank you. If you want some other information about this project that was some of the basis of our discussion, it's langoer.un.org. There you'll also find further information on using Creative Commons licenses, like a handbook that gives you a lot of this information, and also an online course. There's an online course at openlearning.com on how to use Creative Commons, how to identify Creative Commons licenses, and how to reuse them when you're working. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. And let me open it up. I mean, maybe we have a little bit of time for questions.
Yes, we can have like 5 minutes for questions. Somebody was saying that they missed part of the speech because of sound problems, but yes, we are recording this session, so you'll be able to attend it at any other time. Also, the presentation will be available for download. Yes.
Yes, for the handbook and the online course. So you see the link there, and the handbook is at langoer.un.org resources. So for those of you who want to follow up,
It would be very useful, the handbook and so on, and if you want to take the course as well.
exactly.
Are there
Somebody,
stories of 3D images, Elena? Do you know?
is there a 3D images? Yes, on Europeana, which is the digital library for Europe, where museums share their collections. They have a subsection you can search for 3D images with open licenses. It's not a huge number of things, but there are some 3D images available from, I think actually, Greek museums have made those images available for reuse. There's also for NASA, as I mentioned, they have actually a couple of different, well, more than a couple 3D image interactives and image galleries, and those are all public domain. Is it difficult for you to learn to use all of this? No, it's just it's not, everything requires a little bit of time and focus, but the idea is that it's not difficult. It is something that you can master, and that the benefits are great for both not just you as an educator, but for fellow educators and for your students. You can use this material for MOOCs, yes.
Yes, exactly.
If it allows reuse, you can use it. You just have to look at the license. Can I reuse it? Yes? Fantastic. Okay, thank you everyone for listening. The type of format doesn't matter, just the license. I hope wish you good luck in your delve into the big world of open educational resources.
Well, thank you all. I think we can end for now, and I would like to go back to my presentation. Once again, I would like to thank Elena for being here with us and for this interesting seminar. I hope and I'm sure it was useful for everybody. And before you go, I would like just to announce the next online seminar. It will be on the 10th of October at 6 p.m. It will be on digital citizenship by Dorothy Castles. So if you enjoy these seminars, please don't miss this one. Go to the professional development page and join us 15 minutes before the seminar. Okay, see you soon. Thank you again for being here. See you in the next seminar.